Welcome to the Global Wellness HQ family of podcasts. We are your international headquarters for resources and ideas and insight in relation to the 9 elements of holistic wellness. Join us as we interview local and international wellness experts and learn how you can implement and improve one element or dimension of wellness at a time. Our experts will share their practical tips on wellness in one of these core areas: emotional, intellectual, occupational, physical, environmental, financial, spiritual, social, or habitual. We created our family of podcasts as a resource for anyone who is looking to integrate the 9 elements of holistic wellness into their daily lives. Welcome to the show. The Global Wellness HQ family of podcasts is proudly sponsored by the Global Wellness HQ community. It's an online membership group where we meet, we share ideas, we share insights, and we all work together and help one another discover our own personal wellness journeys. If you'd like to join us, you can easily click the link below or scan the QR code, and we love hearing your stories. So we hope to see you in the community. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited. Today, my co-host Pete Kane and I are really excited to have Ann Keller on the show. Ann, welcome to the show.
Hello, it's good to be here.
So first question is the hardest one. Tell us a little bit about who are you and what you do.
So my name is Ann Keller, and I am an LPC, so licensed professional counselor in the state of Georgia. And I see individuals, couples, and families for counseling with mental health issues, anxiety, depression, as well as like things that can be more complex and difficult to treat. And I love the work I do.
Excellent. Well, there's a lot. Now let's jump in. So, what are you most passionate about in your career? What excites you the most? What's the most fun?
Yeah, so I stick within two sort of main categories: marriage enrichment and emotional regulation. Sometimes there's an overlap of those two, but I'm absolutely fascinated with how one impacts the other, and then that one in turn impacts the other. There's like a cyclical relationship between them. So on the mood regulation part, anything that has to do with having a stable mood, which would include management of anxiety, depression, stress, anger, issues like bipolar disorder, and even things that are more difficult to treat. Like one of the things I'm working on today was someone that has unwanted intrusive thoughts. So things there where there's auditory or visual hallucinations. And those things, the things that impact our mood, often impact the marriage. So for instance, if I feel a lot of stress at work that day, I bring that stress home with me. And if that relationship within the marriage is not sorted out, healed, or worked through, then that stress comes back to the office the next day. It's invisible, you don't see it, but the tension and anxiety and stress that's there, that's stored in our bodies, impacts the work that we do, and it impacts our relationships. And so I'm fascinated with helping people with those two things: emotion regulation and marriage enrichment. And then doing that over the lifespan. So I start with teenagers. Sometimes teenagers have anxiety, OCD. They're facing a lot more stressors than teens have faced historically in the past, all the way up to people that are retiring and people that are dealing with issues with dementia or Alzheimer's, or the aging process, death and dying, people that are in the final stages before dying that need help. All of those things, the things that impact us, with emotion regulation over the lifespan impact our relationships? So that's kind of that's where my fascination is.
I love that. And I can see we're going to go on a few tangents because there's a lot to unpack in there. Um, one of the things we talked about before we started recording was, as a recovering accountant, I used to see this all the time. People would come in to see me and they'd say, oh, therapy is too much work or it's too expensive. And as one who used to do the litigation support for divorces, I can assure you that divorce is a lot more expensive,
Yeah.
and usually on the other side, you end up with half your stuff,
Yes.
and an enemy for life in a lot of cases. So, um, let's talk a little bit more about that regulation piece because I think one of the things I see a lot, and I want your opinion on this, people are looking externally for wellness, but one of the things we talk about with wellness in general is it starts inside. If you're not happy with where you are, there is nothing on the outside that's going to make you happier. Um, I'm not trying to give consulting advice or, quite frankly, medical advice, but I think a lot of people can learn a lot from, I'm going to just say this out loud. I worked with an expert who taught me what the various emotions are and what they're teaching us. And I was like, why isn't this taught in primary school?
Yeah. Yeah. I think some of the basic things that relate to managing stress and learning about and managing emotions and the way that we communication is huge. A thing that I think also should be taught in the school system, because the way that we communicate. So for example, if you see your parents communicate with one another and they're not doing such a good job of it and they're angry with one another, you're going to take that way of communicating with you into your relationships on the playground, on the ball field. And even if you're not initially an angry person, those are the words that you have and the vocabulary you have, the pattern of communicating that you have. And so I'm right there with you, Jeff. I really think we should be teaching more about emotions, about regulation, about stress, about communication, about conflict resolution. I think all of those things kids could really benefit from learning before they get into long-term relationships.
And I think that's so. We're going to go down that path because, for one thing, Pete knows about me, and anybody who's met me for more than 2 minutes, I am a dad first, and everything else comes second. Sorry, I'm a father and husband first. Everything else comes second. The reality is, I'm working with my kids and having these conversations, and I think this is going to be a fun conversation with you because there's not a lot of resources out there for a father to teach his kids how to be emotional. I'm going to say emotionally appropriate, and I know that sounds judgy, but it's if the only thing you have in your tool belt is to scream in a fit of rage and punch somebody, guess what? Every instance where you interact with somebody is going to give you a chance to use that tool. Whereas if you can give your kids, so this is a total tangent, but what are some of the things you'd recommend people do just to help their kids? Because I don't believe that there's a parent out there who would say, well, I had kids, just have kids. I don't care how they turn out. I think most people, especially the people who are going to listen to this, they care about either their kids or their spouses, and they're looking for a better way. So what are some things you do or would recommend to help parents have those conversations?
Yeah, I think you can learn about communication skills. Uh, even before that, I think parents need to get on the same page with the parenting paradigm, whatever that paradigm is. If they're not going to spank, then they need to know what they are going to do. And there's so many really good parenting programs. I like active parenting. It's got some good information there for the different stages of parenting. So the first thing I would say is parents having a serious conversation about there's how you did it, There's how I did it. We have to figure out how we are going to do it. And we need to be on the same page. And that's not hard to find. You can find information about parenting books on Amazon, websites. And you want to look for something not that some one person has written that says this was my experience as a parent, but someone that has studied hundreds or thousands of families and knows what parenting, what set of parenting skills works. So I would say that would be the first one. The other thing, the very best thing that you could do for your children is to have an amazing marriage. It is by far the greatest gift that you leave a child, is them being able to be a part of a family where the parents love each other and put one another first and have good communication skills. And that is also a learning curve. There are a lot of different paradigms there too. Prepare Enrich is one of the ones that's good for couples that are first getting married. Gottman and Gottman, it has a good program. When Don and I got married, and now we're 34.
Wow.
I can't even believe that when I say that. It doesn't seem like I'm that old, but one of the smartest things that we did was we sat down and had a conversation, and I said, I did not come from a family where I saw marriage modeled very well. My parents were miserably loyal. They were loyal. They were not going to leave one another. They didn't believe in divorce, but they were miserable. They made each other miserable, and they made us miserable too. And Don came from a family where he had several stepfathers, and saw divorce, remarriage, and saw this back and forth between passion and anger and passion and anger. And I said, I don't think we know what we're doing. And he said, you're right. We don't know what we're doing. And we decided as a young married couple that we would invest in something on an ongoing basis. So sometimes it would be a book, sometimes it would be a Sunday school class, sometimes it would be a video series, sometimes it would be a retreat. And so over the years, we basically found that a lot of different programs boil down to managing stress and manage your emotions, being an emotionally healthy person, and having above average good communication skills. And those were the things that we saw on like a pattern begin to emerge by looking at different programs. And then when we started looking at parenting, because again, we had the same conversation about parenting. Well, in fact, when my youngest one was in kindergarten, there was a counselor on staff at the school, and I went to talk about my child's difficult behavior, and she sent me to parenting class. So that was another area that we decided, okay, we know that we don't know what we're doing, but we have a willingness to learn and get on the same page with how we're going to interact with each other and how we're going to interact with our children.
And if I may, Anne, I love the fact that you're intentional about it. And this is something that comes up with my wife and my kids. It's like so many people just show up and expect life to happen. And it's like, there is no sport on this planet where you get better without practicing. And yet something is important, forget marriage, forget parent-child relationship, but just the word relationship, we all approach it on the assumption that, you've read the same rule book I have, and therefore you and I are going to build a relationship. I'm going to just share that I've had 2 business partnerships break up because we both realized in both cases I realized that we defined the word relationship differently, and I wasn't okay with the other person's definition.
Mm.
And so I think to be intentional, and I love what I'm hearing from you is, you know, it's funny, and you can drive a car but you need a license, you can walk a dog but you need a license. We used to have marriage licenses here, but there was no training or anything for it. And the only requirement to have a child is there's another person willing to do things with you that can lead to that child. um
Yeah, I know when we were leaving the hospital with our firstborn, we came to a stoplight and we were both really quiet. And I said in this quiet moment, I said, can you believe that the hospital let us go home with this baby? They don't know anything about us, and they let us take this baby home.
yeah,
And my husband was like, I know, right?
this little precious, I mean,
Crazy.
I'm going to tell this story. My wife hates it, but literally the day my son was born, the first stop I made after he was born, him and my wife were okay. I left the hospital. She's like, where are you going? And I said, I realized we don't have a car seat. Like,
Right, yeah.
I'm very practical. I was like, oh my God. So I went out and bought a car seat and a football. And my wife's like, what are you going to do with the football? And I'm like, at some point, he and I are going to play catch. And that was the extent of preparation. Like we baby proofed the house and stuff. But you know, too many people, and we're going to address this, too many people are focused on the physical getting ready to have a baby. You put the crib in, you paint the nursery. I went shopping for a minivan and decided nope. But it was never about, I mean, you think about it, there's not a baby on this planet that doesn't cry at some point. Wouldn't it be nice to have the parenting skills and the practice that when a baby cries, this is what you do? I mean, we figured it out pretty quick, but um, when you're overwhelmed, there's mothers dealing with postpartum, and you've got families where there might be some addiction or other issues going on. It's really hard to fathom taking that breath and being patient. And we teach kids up here, we have courses to become a babysitter. I can't think of anything more valuable than teaching someone how to deal with that little newborn that gazes at you with so much love and innocence. And it's like, okay, what do I do with this thing now?
Mhm. Yeah, we had some here locally, we had some really great parenting classes at the local hospital that uh, fell through the cracks a little bit with COVID. And so as a counselor, some of us were having to pick up the pieces in terms of training for what to expect during pregnancy, labor and delivery, nursing, baby care, those types of things. Um, uh, and that's been kind of interesting too, to just see how the field of counseling has changed during the pandemic.
Yes. Can I jump in and ask a question, if
Yes,
I
Yeah.
may?
please.
I'm attentively listening. So, on both sides of the family, we have a thing called narcissism, and I know both situations. One of the spouses would not go to therapy. They said, "You go. I'm not going with you." What do you
Yeah.
think, Anne, when it comes to the fear of couples coming together and being counseled together? What are you seeing out there as maybe the reason, the fears? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So narcissism, they believe very much in themselves. And so very rarely do people that have, so there's narcissistic personality disorder. And then there are people that have some of the traits. And sometimes they're very good people. It doesn't mean that they're bad. It just means that's the way they are created. And pretty much unless someone insists that they go to counseling, you don't see them in counseling. And I would love, one of the things I tell, like if one person calls and the other person is not quite on board yet, is don't do the threatening thing of we've got to go to marriage counseling. Do the invitation of, I found a marriage counselor and I wanted to invite you to come along with me as I interview them to see what I think about them. The other thing with narcissism is giving them some choice. A narcissist wants to be the one who makes the selection oftentimes. And so all therapists are aware that they're not going to be working with every single couple that they talk with, that there'll be some that they work with and some that they refer to other therapists. But I would say one of the things that could be helpful is in the very beginning stages to be able to say, and so this is one of the things I talk to young couples about, is be willing to say, hey, I'm wondering if, so being more inquisitive, I'm wondering if this might be something that we could talk to a marriage counselor about. I'm wondering if there might be some skill sets that could help us navigate not only this problem, but problems in the future. I'm wondering if you would like for me to look for someone. So not saying it in a moment of, you've got to go to counseling, or we've got to go to counseling, or that's it, we're going to marriage counseling, not as a threat or an ultimatum, but as a gentle, inquisitive curiosity of, is this something that could be helpful for you, for me, for both of us, for our children? I think it's a very sad thing that some couples talk for years about the possibility and then never get to counseling. And that's sad, I think, as well. I don't know. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, from what I can see, because my on my side, my younger brother, we it went through a very nasty divorce, and the thought of she would go, but getting him to the table, and his behavior after they were divorced, I didn't talk to him for several years because it was so nasty and everything was the other person's fault. And it was very degrading to witness it. I just said, I'm not going to be a part of it. We've offered to try to do everything. And your brothers and sisters, we're at the end of the rope because we don't know what else to do. And I've heard through the grapevine that it's gotten better, but that's through one person's eyes. So I don't know. But no, it did answer my question.
I think too, even if couples have a feeling that they're going to ultimately be divorced, even if that's a possibility, sometimes it's good to learn good communication skills with this person before you move on to the next relationship. And communication skills that you use during the process of divorce is gonna help your own emotional regulation. It's gonna help your own sense of peace. And by that point, there's what we call a negativity bias override, that the brain is already in fight or flight, seeing things negatively. And so backing way up to working on seeing things in a positive way. We have to work a lot harder to see the positives because we're just created for survival to survive. And so in order to do that, we scan the environment and look for anything negative in order to protect ourselves. And when couples are in that negativity bias override, everything that they see is negative. And it is a sad thing, but it's something that can be helped. You can train yourself to look for positive things. There are skill sets that you can use in order to train yourself to look for positive things. And I think too, I mean, we haven't talked about the spiritual part here, but one of the things that I've noticed as a Christian counselor is that Christians have a different mindset towards marriage. A lot of times, we're looking at as this is a sacred covenant. There's something sacred about this. Therefore, I am committed for a lifetime. And man, if I'm if I'm committed for a lifetime, I don't want to be miserable. And so sometimes they'll be a little more or a little bit less reluctant to come in, but sometimes it's hard for them as well just to get started.
Now, I'm going to share an odd story, and I don't want to make light of any of this, but a friend of mine, they had planned mom and dad's 50th anniversary party for months. Like it was, everybody in the community was there. And dad was one of those stoic people. He was a farmer and, he kept everything bottled up. And I'm not kidding. The day of the party, everyone's giving toasts, and everybody's like, "Come on, get up and give a speech." And he stood up and he said, "I'm done," and he walked out. Everyone was like, "What?" And his daughters who planned the thing went after him, and they said, "What have you done?" And he said, "I've spent 50 years listening to your mother tell me how to think, act, and feel." And he said, "I'm like in my 70s now." I can't remember. He was like 75. He said, I don't have many days left, but you know what? I'm going to spend the rest of my days by myself, enjoying what I want to watch on TV. I was just like, oh my God. Like, I feel like you could have mentioned, like think about 50 years of, like a grain of sand builds up in an oyster and that becomes a pearl. This guy literally carried 50 years worth of grains of sand under his skin, and the 50th wedding anniversary was the moment where he's like, I can't take this anymore. And it was really heart-wrenching because it was, first of all, it was avoidable, but it ripped the entire, like the way he did it. I mean, again, I don't think he chose that moment. It was just that moment where his soul said enough's enough, but it ripped the family apart. And, they were close knit. I think they had 4 kids, and 4 kids had homesteads on the family farm. Nothing documented because we all get along and everything's great. And all of a sudden, literally this entire family was ripped apart, and they spent all of their money on legal fees trying to unravel the complexities of their family.
Yeah, sometimes if people are not happy, they have a line in the sand. And sometimes it's when the kids graduate from high school, or when the kids graduate from college, or when the kids get married and move away. If I've done it for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and it actually helps them to have hope that there is an end in sight. And for those that have already decided ahead of time that this isn't a covenant that I made just to that other person. This is a covenant that I made with God, and this sacred space of what I do impacts my relationship with God is different. But what's interesting, putting up with someone else telling you what to think, what to do, what to believe, where to go. You didn't do this right. You didn't do that right. All those little things can really grate on a person's self-esteem, on their happiness, on their emotional well-being. And there's, I love that saying, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Why you'd want to skin a cat, I still don't understand why we say that.
It's a very odd expression.
Yeah, but there's more than one way to do things. So you think about a couple that's got land, and you could plant beans there, or you could plant corn. It really doesn't matter what the other person does, what my spouse does, whether they plant beans or whether they plant corn. What really matters is how that particular topic can bring us closer together. Thinking of it like magnets, that a magnet can draw you together, or it can push you apart. It's got that push-pull feature. And when we in our minds have this mindset that there's nothing that comes my way that I can't use to draw closer to my spouse, that I have an opportunity to grow closer to my spouse. Beans and corns. We can talk about beans and corn and how we like to cook it, how we like to can it, what we like to see in the sprouts, how we like to plant it. It doesn't really matter whether you plant beans or corn, because you'll have to decide on something else the next year.
I love it. Now, we're gonna run out of time way quicker than I'd like normally, but and this has been a fabulous conversation, and we'll have another one, I promise, because we just went on one of the tangents and explored it. So thank you. For anybody who's listening and they're like, I really like this Anne, I need to talk to her. What's the best way for our listeners to get in touch with you?
AnnKeller.com. So you can go straight to AnnKeller.com. And there's a link there for you can schedule your own appointment. And so scheduling a 15-minute free consultation gives you an opportunity to talk about anything that you'd like to talk about. So sometimes clients use it to call to find referrals. Sometimes they call because they might be interested in counseling. Sometimes they just need to know what to do next. And I would say that the registering for a 15-minute free consultation would probably be the fastest way.
Awesome. Well, Anne, I really sincerely want to thank you for our conversation today. I think I got a lot out of it, and I know our listeners will. So thank you very much, Anne.
My pleasure.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to our show. We hope that you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to either click the link below or scan the QR code to register and listen to other episodes of our podcast. Or if you think your business or you would be a great guest to be on our show, we're always looking for experts in one of the 9 elements of holistic wellness. We'd love to have you. You can either click the link below or you can scan the QR code and complete our speaker intake form. Thank you, and to your wellness.